The first sound was a soft, almost hesitant vibration, a delicate hum in the dust-thin air of Mars. For weeks, the Mars Subsurface Explorer had been quietly working, its mechanical arm pressing deeper into the rust-red soil than any machine had dared before. 5 centimeters, 7, 10, each plunge pulling secrets from beneath the planet's weathered skin. On Earth, scientists sat in dim mission rooms, eyes locked on green-lit telemetry screens, watching the numbers climb. And then, on this day, they pushed beyond the limits. 20 meters, 300 times deeper than Curiosity or Perseverance had ever gone. Far below the reach of Mars's deadly surface radiation, into a realm untouched for perhaps billions of years. The mission's purpose was as clear as it was audacious. Find what the surface had erased. Ice, ancient organics, maybe something more. At 10 meters, the instruments had already sent back hints of complex organic compounds, chemical whispers that on Earth often precede life. Excitement spread through the control room like static. But then the drill pressed to 15 meters, and something shifted. The resistance dropped. Not the gradual easing of soft sediment, but a sudden give, as if the bit had punched through into a hollow space. Sensors caught the faint hiss of gas escaping. Carbon dioxide. And methane. Methane. On Mars, that word doesn't just mean interesting, it means pay attention. Because on Earth, over 95% of methane comes from living things. Even though geological processes can make it too, every spike is a riddle scientists can't ignore. The drill kept going, deeper into that strange void. At 20 meters, the explorer began pulling its deepest sample yet. Then, silence. One moment, the data flowed, readings, temperatures, chemical analysis. The next, every display went dark. The status lights on the console faded from green to gray. Engineers blinked at the empty screens, exchanging looks that said more than words could. There had been no warning, no slow decline. Just gone. And yet, just before that silence swallowed the signal, one final message had arrived. A system flag buried in the stream of data. BIO-A17. Few outside NASA even knew what that meant. Inside the agency, it's a designation reserved for something very specific, an unclassified organic compound that doesn't match any known Martian chemistry. Something different. Something they didn't expect. Hours later, as the mission team scrambled for answers, the European Space Agency's trace gas orbiter passed over the drilling site. Its sensors picked up a localized methane spike directly above the now silent lander, a concentrated plume, like a breath released from deep underground. That's when the questions began to turn into something darker. NASA's Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter captured high-resolution images showing a strange patch of darkened soil around the lander, freshly disturbed. No debris, no crater, just altered ground where moments before there had been nothing. Theories began to bloom, each more unsettling than the last. Had the drill breached an ancient methane pocket sealed for eons? Had it tapped into frozen brines deep underground, releasing something that had slept since Mars was warmer and wet? Or had it found something else? Among the last scraps of telemetry were 3 anomalies: a small spike in methane readings, a sharp rise in drill motor temperature, and an unexplained irregularity in the molecular scanner's data. And then there was the strangest detail: the lander's AI initiating containment protocol. That phrase might sound routine, but it isn't. Containment is not for broken equipment. It's for when a system detects something that might be biological or dangerous or simply unknown. On a planet where there are no humans to warn, the AI had acted on its own. 11 seconds after the BIO-A17 flag appeared, the lander went dark. To some in the mission team, this was not the sign of a failure. It was the sign of a choice. The Explorer hadn't died. It had locked itself away. And if that's true, then we may be looking at something unprecedented. For the first time in history, a machine on another planet may have found possible traces of life, and then shut itself down to protect it. But what exactly happened in those last moments before silence? And why did the lander's radar detect something impossible just before it vanished? The answers, at least the ones NASA will admit, are far stranger than anyone expected. But in the weeks following that broadcast, something unexpected began to happen. Instead of fading into the background like so many news-of-the-day stories, this one seemed to tighten its grip on the public imagination. People weren't just talking about it at coffee shops or in the quiet hum of late-night online forums. They were dissecting it, analyzing every nuance, every subtle shift in Musk's tone, every inflection in his voice. It was as if the world had been handed a mystery, not a press release. The words were there on the surface, but what they meant? That was the real question. And so the collective attention began to burrow deeper. Reporters scrambled for angles, finance experts scrambled for explanations, and Tesla shareholders scrambled for reassurance. But Musk himself? He seemed to vanish from the chatter, retreating into the shadows of his next move. That silence was louder than any interview could have been. The man who was always online, always posting, always stirring the pot, had chosen for once to say nothing. And when someone like Elon Musk chooses silence, it doesn't just feel like absence, it feels like a signal. The theories multiplied like wildfire. Some insisted it was a strategic pivot, a magician's misdirection before a grand reveal. Others feared it was the early rumble before the collapse of a giant. And then there were those who whispered about something darker, that maybe Musk wasn't in full control of the narrative anymore. The stock market has always been a place of numbers and logic, but in moments like this, it becomes a stage for emotion, fear, greed, hope, and every investor was trying to read between the lines like gamblers staring at the turn of a card. Meanwhile, deep inside Tesla's headquarters, you could feel the tension if you were anywhere close to the beating heart of the company. Engineers walked faster in hallways, project managers spoke in shorter sentences, and the buzz of speculation was so thick you could almost hear it in the air. The company wasn't collapsing, far from it, but it was shifting. And anyone who's ever worked in a place on the edge of a great change knows that the shift isn't always loud. Sometimes it's a quiet, creeping thing that makes the hair stand up on the back of your neck before you even understand why. The outside world didn't see that quiet tension. What they saw instead were strange little ripples. Projects suddenly delayed without explanation. Supply chain whispers about halted orders. Cryptic job postings that hinted at technologies Tesla had never publicly announced. Musk had always been a master of hinting at the future, dangling a thread just long enough for people to chase it. But now it wasn't clear whether these ripples were part of a plan or a symptom of something breaking apart. And then came the leaks. They weren't dramatic explosions of truth, no smoking gun email or scandalous memo, but small, oddly precise pieces of information finding their way into the public sphere. Someone close to the battery division saying a major supplier deal had fallen through. A former executive hinting that the company's growth targets had been quietly revised downward months ago. Even a Tesla software engineer, anonymous of course, posting in a private online forum about how the atmosphere inside feels like everyone's bracing for something big, and not in a good way. But here's the thing. Those leaks didn't cause panic. If anything, they deepened the intrigue. Because for every negative rumor, there was another story about Musk spending late nights in the design lab, about undisclosed patents being quietly filed, about meetings with obscure aerospace and AI firms. The story wasn't collapsing into a simple "Tesla is in trouble" headline. It was fracturing into two parallel narratives. In one, Musk was a man cornered by loss. In the other, he was a man preparing the biggest pivot of his life. And that's what kept people hooked, the not knowing. We live in an age where certainty is a kind of currency, where everyone is desperate to have the real story first. But this was uncertainty weaponized. It was the suspense before the final act, stretched out over weeks, maybe months. It wasn't just business news anymore. It was a psychological drama playing out in real time, with every investor, every fan, every critic cast as both audience and participant. Somewhere in the middle of all this, a strange shift began to happen in public sentiment. Those who had been quick to mock Musk's apparent loss began to sound cautious. Because here's the truth. Whether you admire him or despise him, there's always been one undeniable pattern. Every time the man seems cornered, he finds a way out that no one saw coming. And that knowledge sat in the back of people's minds like a ticking clock. The countdown had started. But to what? At Tesla's factories, production continued, but insiders described the atmosphere as electric in a way that wasn't about the cars. There was talk, quiet, careful talk, about the project. No one would say what it was, not even off the record, but it had the same hushed reverence as those early days when Tesla first revealed the Roadster or the Model S. Something was being built, something not yet meant for the public eye. And if that was true, then Musk's announcement wasn't an ending. It was a feint. If you looked closely enough, you could see the fingerprints of strategy in the chaos. The $109 billion loss that had been plastered across headlines wasn't just a wound, it was a curtain. And behind that curtain, something was moving. The silence that followed was not empty, it was loaded, almost vibrating with unspoken thoughts. The teams around the world were now in a strange limbo. They had what they wanted: contact, data, confirmation that Voyager 1 was still listening. But the meaning of what it sent back was another question entirely. No one wanted to be the first to say it out loud, but the possibility was undeniable. This wasn't just cosmic noise or a simple scientific reading. It was deliberate. That night, in a dimly lit lab in California, one of the analysts sat alone staring at the waveform. She replayed it over and over, her eyes unfocused, letting the pattern wash over her. She remembered being a child, lying in her backyard with a cheap telescope pointed at the sky, feeling like the stars were whispering to her. Now, years later, it almost felt like they were. She knew she wasn't supposed to think like that. Scientists needed to be detached, logical, but she couldn't shake the feeling that what she was hearing was alive. Meanwhile, the media began to catch wind of the whispers. A leaked email, a cryptic post on a science forum, a strange audio clip circulating on obscure websites. It all combined to create a storm of speculation. Some headlines declared it proof of alien contact. Others dismissed it as a hoax or an overblown technical glitch. But the truth was, the people closest to the data weren't so sure themselves. Inside the NASA control room, arguments broke out. Should they publicly release the full message? Should they wait until they knew more? The longer they hesitated, the more conspiracy theories grew. The world had been on edge for years. Economic crises, political instability, environmental disasters, and something about this moment felt like the spark that could set everything off. Some thought it would inspire hope, a reminder that we are not alone and perhaps never were. Others feared it could ignite chaos, religious upheaval, or panic. One engineer, normally quiet, finally spoke up. "We've been sending messages into space for decades, hoping someone would answer. Well, this might be it. And if we hide it, we become the very thing we always criticized, gatekeepers of the truth." The room fell silent again, but this time it was a different kind of silence. Everyone was thinking the same thing. Once this was out, there would be no putting it back. The decision was made just before dawn. The data, raw and unfiltered, would be released to the public with a short statement. Voyager 1 has transmitted an unusual signal from beyond the heliosphere. Its origin is currently unknown. Analysis is ongoing. That was all they would say. The rest would be left for the world to interpret. Within hours, the signal went viral. Musicians remixed it into haunting tracks. Cryptographers tried to decode it. Spiritual leaders gave sermons about it. Politicians called emergency meetings. And somewhere, in a small apartment on the other side of the planet, a retired radio operator sat listening to the signal on loop, tears running down his face, whispering, "I knew they'd answer one day." But the story didn't end there, because a week later, something strange happened. Voyager 1 sent another transmission. This one was shorter, simpler, as if whoever, or whatever, was sending it had realized we were listening more closely now. And buried in the new signal was a sequence of numbers that didn't belong to any known cosmic measurement. It wasn't coordinates we recognized. It wasn't a frequency marker. It was something else. A mathematician in Argentina noticed the pattern first. She emailed NASA with a single sentence, "I think they're telling us when." When she decoded it, her hands began to shake. It was a date. and it was less than 2 years away. Now, the question that hung over the entire planet was no longer, what does it mean? It was, what happens when the date arrives? And in the quiet, endless stretch between the stars, Voyager 1 kept drifting, silent once more, like a messenger who had spoken and was now waiting for us to decide whether we would listen or ignore the call until it was too late.